pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This is a workshop session, so public comments will be at the end and will be related to the matters of the workshop. Today's session is on the 1920 recommended operating budget. I'll turn the floor over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's that time of year again, and here we are in our budget workshop. I want to say a few words by means of introduction about the process that would be followed. This is primarily for our new board members who may not have been through our recent process yet. So our presentation tonight is of the superintendent's recommended budget. This is essentially my recommendation to you. It may not be the budget that you send to the City Council. Following this meeting tonight, the Finance Committee will meet on January 10th with the sole object of working on the budget recommendations. They'll make those recommendations to the full board on January 15th. The expectation is that the board will deliberate and amend the budget as it sees fit and send the budget request to the City Council. At that point, this becomes the board's budget request as opposed to the superintendent's recommended budget. And then, of course, the process unfolds after that in terms of discussions with the city and eventual reconciliation with the funds that the board is allotted. We want to emphasize that there are no surprises to be found in this budget. The budget is extremely close to the budget estimate provided at your retreat in July. And it consists of a base of current services plus the SOP goals as anticipated. The base this year is larger, as predicted, due to the loss of your medical insurance reserve, which the city required you to use for 18-19. We knew that, it was predictable that it would have that effect on the base. In addition to that, we have a significant increase this year in transportation. You'll recall that last year we had no increase because we extended the contract of the current vendor in return for no increase in this current year. But that card has already been played. So tonight, Tom and Kristen will review the SOP goals and provide a general overview of the recommended budget, including unpacking the base expenditure of current services. Several board members have already presented questions, and we encourage that and ask that you keep that coming. And we will answer these as quickly as we can until the 15th and share all responses from any individual to any individual board member with the board as a whole. But and some of the questions that have already been submitted will actually be addressed tonight. Others we will simply send out as soon as we have answers to them. You have copies of the superintendent's recommended operating budget in front of you in hard copy. You received it electronically on Friday, and copies for members of the public who are here tonight as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tom Hamilton, our CFO, and Kristen Carthage, our budget director, to present the 1920 recommended budget.
Okay, 1920, here we go. So I want to start out by thanking the superintendent as well as my colleagues, the chiefs and other Board of Education employees, and particularly thanking Kristen Karshmit and Nina Laria, who were really instrumental in pulling together the budget this year. I am going to try to move through this as quickly as I can so that we leave time for questions. So I'd ask you to hold questions if you can until the end, and then we'll go from there. And we also provided you copies of the presentation just so you can take it with you afterwards, and it's up here on the screen as well. So the budget is proposed with an increase. The budget for next year is proposed at $203,325,000, which is an increase of 12.8 million, or about 6.7%. This is very, very close to the projection, as the superintendent indicated, that we had provided to you back in August. So it's just a shade under the number that we had projected back in August. It is therefore consistent with the multi-year forecast, and I know that there was a request that we update the forecast, and we have now done that, and we'll be not going over that tonight, but sharing that with you and discussing that with the Finance Committee on Thursday. So the recommended budget funds contractual salary increases for all of our employees. It funds the health insurance cost increases, which are driven by projected increases in premiums on the state 2.0 health plan. It does fund program improvements totaling $3,375,000, which are program improvements that are all consistent with and called for, provided for in the district strategic operating plan. We're going to spend a good part of the presentation going over those program improvements in some detail. It does incorporate a change in the handling of two grants, change in the handling of the excess gas grant and the Medicaid grant. Previously, these grants were handled as contra expenses, meaning they were really in our general fund budget as negative expenditures, and we have proposed what would really be a more standard treatment for grants and the way we handle all other grants, which is to put these grants in the separate grant fund apart from the local operating budget. So that has some implications for how the numbers flow through on the budget, and so that has been incorporated into this budget. And finally, the budget incorporates departmental budget changes that total about a little under $2.4 million, and a number of these expenses are a number of these expenses are one-time, non-recurring expenses, and some of them are recurring expenses. And we've provided an itemization by department here, and we will be certainly available to answer questions about any of those as we go through the presentation. So the budget goals should look familiar because they all are part of the strategic operating plan. On this slide, we've listed 9 budget goals. 8 of the budget goals are specifically provided for in the strategic operating plan, and goal 9 represents the current services budget, or the balance of the budget. I'm going to ask Kristen to walk through each of these goals individually. Kristen.
So budget goal number 1 is phase 2 of the 4 special teachers to be added to the remaining 6 elementary schools. As you recall, phase 1, we added a 4 special teacher to Brookside, Fox Run, Jefferson, Kendall, Marvin, and Tracy. And in the presentation list what type of teacher they had and will continue to have. Phase 2 is adding them to the remaining 6 elementary schools, which is Columbus, Cranberry, Merrimack, Rowley, Silvermine, and Wolf Pit. Some which have ideas on what kind of teachers they're going to add, but we'll get to that part when we do the SBB phase of the budget. We assumed 6 teachers at $115,000 cost of salary and benefits for a total cost of $690,000.
And this, of course, is to extend the school day by 30 minutes. So we will have a uniform, normal school day at the elementary level.
Okay, budget goal number 2 is phase 2 of the band instrument lessons. Basically the flip side of the 6 elementary schools from budget goal number 3. This particular goal is being raised in order to complete state-required 25 credit program. And as you can see on this slide, it lists out the student grades, the year of graduation, how many credits are required by the state. Here we assume we need 5 teachers at an average salary and benefit cost of $115,000 or a total incremental request of $575, approximately 2.5 teachers per high school. We determine what type of teachers needed based on the scheduling. And what this is telling us is when we add a credit to the requirement, it costs us $575,000. Budget goal number 4, we have the 6th grade summer school, and that's a projected district operating contribution of $245,000. And this would be a 1920 summer program, which would include grades 5 and 6 middle school, in addition to our K-4 elementary program.
I think the curriculum committee is aware of this, but this is the first local expenditure toward summer learning. Thus far, we've been operating with the summer school grant, Title I grant, and the Federal School District grant, and private donors. And we are having discussions with private donors, so we feel that we will receive more support, but their expectation is that locally, the board will also have some skin in the game on this. The plan is to expand the summer school through 8th grade. So we have next year and 2 more years to go to achieve that goal.
Budget goal number 5 is for choice programs, particularly the Montessori school primary years. And this is for a total cost of $317,000, of which we are adding 1 teacher and 1 para-educator salary and benefit cost of $145,000. And then we have 2 one-time costs listed, one being the National Montessori Certification Training of $12,000, and then a second cost of $160,000 related to the special required furniture and furnishings and facilities costs related to plumbing and some other equipment we need here. Will be a multi-year rollout of the Montessori preschool program at Brookside. Brookside will no longer have the classroom under school readiness, but it will be replaced by this Montessori preschool classroom. And we'll get further details as we do the feasibility study.
So the idea is, I didn't realize until this minute that we're dealing with 1 primary school classroom. I had no idea what this money was going to be used for. So the idea is phase it, so you've agreed it's going to be Brookside School?
No, you haven't. This is a placeholder. So we have I think next week, Tim Nee will be here and the feasibility study will get started. He's looking at several sites.
Right.
We are assuming that our finest site that would need the least modification and renovation is at Brookside, where we have a courtyard, where we have large classrooms, where we have bathrooms. These classrooms need a dishwasher and a sink as well, because there is in-class dining in the Montessori model. So we're just assuming that Brookside is going to be the best place. That there may be a different finding on that. This is a 5-year rollout, so.
1 classroom, so year 1 is 1 primary classroom.
Correct.
Ultimately, at the end of 5 years, how many classrooms
6.
are you envisioning?
6, 2 primary. Primary is ages 3 to 5. 2 lower elementary. Lower elementary is 6, 7, 8, and 2 upper elementary, which is 8, 9, 10.
And how much of the building will that be, how much of that Brookside building would be devoted to Montessori school?
About a third. I think the parallel, if it were at Brookside, this could also be the new model for Jefferson, for the new neighborhood school at Jefferson. But in any event, the parallel to this would be Silver Mine, where we found it several years ago where the dual language was a strand in a regular elementary school. So then you come to the end of 5 years, right? And the next generation of board members and leaders will have to make a decision. Do you expand it to the whole school? Is it wildly successful to warrant that? Do you move it to its own location? What do you do in terms of that? But what we're anticipating here is a 6-classroom, 5-year rollout.
Just as a comment, the difficulties of looking long-term in relation to education is reflected perfectly in this initiative. All of this depends on a year-by-year allocation from the city, which you may or may not get, which is the difficulty we have to face. We could start the first year, hopefully, maybe not, but that's hopefully, maybe not for every single year. And once you get, say, 2 or 3 years in, there's no turning back, irrespective of what we get from the city, because those kids have to progress. So this is.
It's true, and that's a challenge every district has
Yeah.
faced in this and a number of other program areas.
I would say there is a turn back point, not a turn back point, but you can easily transition from a Montessori school circumstance into a regular gen ed.
I know, but there's an agreement with parents. Once they begin X, they expect it to be X, not have to switch over to Y right midstream. That's the problem.
I mean, our perception is there's a lot of interest in this. This may be a program that has a waiting list. And so I think you're right. Once you start it, you'd be hard pressed to turn it back.
Thank you.
I just wanted to bring up for a second the preschool aspect. So we did used to run some preschools, namely at Brookside, and they were school readiness funded. These students wouldn't be school readiness kids.
Correct.
So they would just apply for a lottery.
Well, preference would be given to the students in the Brookside neighborhood. And then any other, if the class was not filled by those students, it would be open to others.
I'm sorry, would there be a cost short of someone being eligible for additional services needs based on finances? Would there be a cost to attend?
No.
And that's
No, this is a public school program in a public school. It's just that the Montessori schools start at age 3.
Right.
As opposed to age 5.
Budget goal number 6, moving on to choice programs. This looks familiar to you, I'm sure. We've added a few new schools to this list. First off, Silvermine has moved up. We were funding K through 2 last year, now we're funding K through 3, and that's an incremental 101,000. Jefferson was actually 4 to 5 now in this budget year. It's just grade 4, so we're actually taking some magnet funding incrementally away. Columbus was K through 7. now
Chris,
it's
if you mean 5th and 1920? No, 4th is probably.
grade 4,
Because as the kids age out,
right?
the magnet is over. So my assumption is we had 4 and 5.
And now we're
Those
gonna-
4th graders are going into 5th
Right,
grade.
that's a
So
good
it's really
point.
just 5th grade that you're
Right.
funding. And then next year there will be nothing.
Correct. So we'll make that change on there. Columbus, we were funding K through 7, now we're gonna fund K through 8. Actually, it's actually decreasing slightly just because of the cohorts moving up and they're out of room, so that's why that's happening. The P-Tech Norwalk program, or otherwise known as NECA, 9 through 12, is holding steady at 400. Medical Academy was funded at 9 through 10, now it's grades 9 through 11, so they have an incremental 50,000. The IP program is based on equivalized students, grades 11 through 12, an incremental 17,000. The Tracy School Character Ed School is new to this edition. They've applied for national certification, and that's why we're including them on this list. We're starting off with grades K through 3, and that's $269,000.
They get only if they get the national certification.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the assumption. Marine Science Pathway at Brian McMahon is new, and that's grades 9 and 10, that's an incremental 50,000, and then the Media Pathways is an incremental 50,000, grades 9 through 12. And just some guidelines on what the potentially can make you a choice program or magnet school. You're either a legacy program such as Silvermine, Jefferson, or Columbus. You're a high school pathway establishing program of study.
So a pathway qualifies.
If it's district-wide.
If it's district,
No, if it's only offered in one school and it's open district-wide, it would qualify.
Or it meets national program standards such as hopefully Tracy Treasure at school. Budget goal number 7, which we're calling a healthier high school start time, is, what we've included here is a placeholder for alternative number 2, which is $732,000. This was estimated by school bus consultants. If you look on here, here's the charges that have gone to the committee, but bullet number 5 has been bolded because that's really the financial related point here, to develop with the assistance of SBC a cost neutral solution for the school start time adjustment and a preferred solution if they're not the same. So this is, because we may not be able to do a cost neutral solution, that's why we put this placeholder in, due to the early time of the elementary school, maybe being too early under a cost neutral solution.
And I think there was a question from Barbara that you had sent out on the transportation, so that of the total increase in transportation, 732,000.
This was in that line, got it, okay.
Yes.
That's buried in one of those
You asked
object
that
codes.
too,
It's buried
yeah.
in an object code.
Mhm.
So it's a 732 plus the 441.
Right, you have both the contractual increase of 2.75% plus the 732,000.
Is it, may I ask a question to Ms. Keys, who's on the task force for this? Do you envision, do you see the task force in making a recommendation that may add to the costs for this?
I'm hopeful that's not gonna take place. I know we have our next meeting, which will be, I believe, on Thursday.
So we've had 2 very productive meetings, one in November, one in December.
Right.
We are meeting twice in January, twice in February. The meeting on Thursday is actually, after we have a chat with the school doctor, we're going to actually identify the 3 options and 3 for transportation, 3 scheduling options. The committee has reviewed national practice of this, and it seems pretty clear that the no-cost option is to flip the high school time with the elementary time. We don't think that will be acceptable to the community, because it would start the elementary schools at 7:30, and you would literally have, 5 and 6-year-olds waiting for a bus at 6:45 in the dark, instead of 15 and 16-year-olds, right? So there appears to be kind of a psychological norm around not starting the elementaries before 8. And so, that creates a different model. And so we're gonna be looking at a couple of models that do that. I think we're fairly optimistic, though, that the cost of doing this may be less. And then we also have the variable, which will be largely driven by our survey results, of whether or not to give a year's notice for planning, during which time this would become an expense. Let's say it was 400,000 instead of 700. This would become an expense in the next year. And then the other option that we will look at is whether or not the 2 smaller high schools, NECA, PTEC, and CGS, could pilot this next year at a more reasonable lower cost. So we have a lot of options to look at. We have a bus consultant that is very good, that is helping us, but we'll keep you posted. I think you're going to be hearing from this group in March in terms of recommendations.
And that's what we were telling also to survey out to all community members and parents.
Okay, so budget goal number 8 is the sunset of the Special Education Development Fund. As you're aware, we've been funded for 3 years, and in the the 1920 year is the sunset of that, so we just wanted to illustrate that we are absorbing these costs, within our current budget here. And we are seeing reduced trends in out-of-district placements and as well as an increase in the total number of students with disabilities. In addition, we are handling the absorption of a decrease in the excess cost grant of $1 million. So that's built into here as well.
Okay, and finally, budget goal 9, last slide is the current services budget, which I already made reference to, but again, the elements of this 9.5 million are the salaries, salary increases, wage increases that are part of negotiated collective bargaining agreements, that are positions that are funded in the local budget to the tune of $2.3 million. There's $2.6 million of salaries that are moved from the local budget to the grants budget that relate to the excess cost in Medicaid grants. And there are also other costs of $1.4 million that were moved, again, from the local budget to the grants budget that relate to, again, the excess cost in Medicaid grant. The next two items, again, we've talked about employee benefit, the local budget increase of a bit over $800,000. I've got another slide in a little bit to go over the details on that. And the departmental increases that total just under $2.4 million, which we've, on the first slide, gave you a breakout on.
Tom, I don't know if you're gonna explain any more, and we need to look at questions because we have so much ground to cover, but these two lines of the 2.6 and 1.4, it's just, I understand you're moving them from one place to another, but why are they requiring a budgetary increase of $4 million? The logic eludes me completely.
Me too.
Yeah, okay, we kind of anticipated that question. If you
Is
go
it
to
coming
the
later?
appendix, you want to put that up, it's the appendix on slide 22. Okay, this is a reconciliation of special education, and it is a little counterintuitive because the current treatment, again, as I indicated, it's really a non-standard. Our current treatment is a non-standard treatment. We set up these contra accounts. So, I'm not sure if there's a pointer, but yeah. Oh, there you go.
So this is, just the context for this is we had a lot of historical budgeting practices that were not, considered best or current practice. This is one of the very last of them. We've really changed all the things that had a substantive, effect on services and students, but this is more an accounting change.
Right, so these two numbers up here, excess cost grant and Medicaid grant reimbursement, you see they're bracketed numbers, meaning those are negative numbers. So those are the two contra accounts that I'm referring to.
But
And
they're negative revenue numbers, which means
Makes them
they're.
positive.
right, they're negative numbers because their revenue's coming in. When we take those down to 0 and move them down here to the Fund 12, you notice it's going down from 4.4 million to 3.4 million. But when you take them down from 4.4 million and 600,000 down to 0, the impact on your local budget is your local budget goes up by 400,000 and 600,000. So that's why it has an impact on the local budget. It's because we've got a negative number currently in the local budget. We're taking the negative number down to 0, and the increase in the budget in that line item is those amounts that
So
you see.
And that
this
largely-
goes back to the fact that our budget isn't really 194, when, whatever. It's actually, 240 or something like that, and
Right.
that's the grants.
Yes.
So what you've really done is just, I get it now.
Yeah, we
I finally
moved
got
it to
it.
the grants. Now, I think that,
It's in the pie chart.
there are, some other interesting and important things to note here. If you look at the top line on the, I don't know where my pointer went, but the top line, the 40 million is the actual budget currently for special education. And if you then bring that all the way down to the bottom, the revised budget that they're going to have, if the local budget dropped to 35 million, plus the $4 million in the grants fund, they're gonna have $39.1 million. So there's actually about $1 million savings overall here in special education that's built into these numbers.
Most of this is, at least my memory of, is the 500 object codes, which I got mixed up with. If you can somehow next year maybe possibly have an asterisk with a page like this, because I really had trouble, I just didn't have time to figure it out when I wrote that question. And it's obvious when you do this.
Okay. So let me go back to, okay, so then, so we talked about health insurance, departmental increases, hopefully that answers that question. We have a few slides here where we talk about the enrollment, and I guess the highlights on enrollment is that the total enrollment is projected to increase by 39 students from 11,385 students to 11,424 on the bottom of page 14. We are experiencing an increase at the high school and middle school levels and a slight decrease at the elementary and pre-K levels. Based on the relatively minor change in overall enrollment, we have not built into the requested budget or recommended budget a separate enrollment growth appropriation, which there have been some years when we did that. We did not build that in this year based on the 39 additional students.
Tom, could you, I think I understood most of your response to my question the other day. There is still what we call a reserve teacher for enrollment purposes for every school.
No, we have the reserve, I think there's two reserves, and you may be confusing the two. We have a 1% reserve that is built into the student-based budgets. And that is a enrollment fluctuation reserve is how I would refer to it. And so we required each of the schools to set aside 1% of their student-based operating budget to cover potential enrollment fluctuations that could occur at various schools throughout the district. And then what we did after we had the October 1 enrollment figures, we looked at what the actual enrollment figures were compared to budget. And we made adjustments to those schools where there was an actual enrollment higher than, greater than what the budget had been based on. And we used in order to fund that, we sort of scooped up the money, if you will, from the other schools that were at or below the projected enrollment that the budget was built on.
So this is the concept of money following the child, right? You move from one school to another, your money moves with you, so the school can accommodate your needs. Obviously, you're not at the previous school, so they do not get a windfall of having the money without having the students.
Fine, I still don't buy into it completely. I'm sure it makes sense.
Okay, maybe at the finance committee, we can continue the discussion at the finance committee?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I think I've sort of touched on the major items on enrollment. In terms of budget summary, page 17 is a summary by major object of expenditure, just picking out a couple of the major items on this page to draw attention to. One, in terms of the increase in salaries, that's driven by, of course, contractual wage increases, as well as the fact that we use a 150 account as a holding account. So that is classified as a wage account. We use that as a holding account for program improvements until we are at the point where we are distributing the budget to the schools. There's $2,643,000 built into that $6 million, as really program improvement holding account. Other items of note, under other services, the 500 series account, you'll see that those are going up by about $4.8 million. That consists of transportation, roughly $1.2 million increase in transportation, of which $732,000 is related to the start time issue. The excess cost, the contra account I was referring to, going from a negative $4.4 million to zero, is another piece of the cost, and then that's offset by $800,000 of savings in out-of-district tuition because of the fact that we are sending fewer students out of district. And in supplies and materials, smaller item, we've got some curriculum supplies and curriculum items in there, electricity, textbooks, and some expenses in the talent office. The other thing I did want to note on this particular slide, we have incorporated into our budget book a requested budget column as well as a recommended budget column. The requested budget column represents what was originally submitted to us by the various departments or different offices in the Board of Education. And what this shows is that there were some reductions obviously made to the requested budgets that we received because we proposed a budget, superintendent has recommended a budget that is about $3.7 million lower than the amount that was originally submitted as a request.
Just to review, so the employee benefits, that's health insurance, that's $800,000, we were at $9. And of the salaries, $2 million is program improvements, is the balance roughly $4 million, just contractual wage, GWI and stuff?
Yes, by and large, yes.
So if we're looking at like same services budget, the three biggest components would be the $4 million in GWI, 800 in health insurance, and 450 or 440, whatever it was, for bus transportation. Contractual increase.
Yes.
So that would be same services, but am I missing anything else?
You know, I think there are some other items that we would put in there that would add up to you know, a bit more than that. Certainly, you know, we've indicated same service budget at about 9.5 million, or about 5%.
I think we need to know what that breakdown is. At some, you know, on
Yeah.
Thursday or whenever.
Okay.
But I think that, we need to know that number.
Okay, there is one new central office position that's added to the budget in the curriculum office. I think Dr. Myers is here. You want to just
Good evening.
jump in for a moment?
In our proposal, we do have a new position for visual and performing art instructional specialist. We currently have one instructional specialist, that's Helene Becker, who's in charge of our ESL services. One of the things that we're looking at here is our district-wide commitment to K-12 support for visual and performing arts, making sure that we have clear articulation and integration of the visual and performing arts. We're finding this to be one of our really exploding areas because we're also looking at it in some of our pathways as we build out media and digital understandings and the visual nature of that kind of work, as well as we build out our music program and we included the elementary band. We need that clear articulation, grades K through 12. The other thing too is this is a huge leverage point for our overall improvement plan, that we make sure that we maintain a commitment to the arts for all students and that we have a coherent K through 12 plan. This position helps us to leverage the work that we've already done and to increase the quality and to ensure the success for all students.
So we had over a dozen new positions recommended, and many were compelling. This is the only one that has survived, based upon, you know, our perception that while we have pockets of excellence in our visual and performing arts program, we don't have a consistent approach for, and well-integrated approach for each child, particularly in the visual arts. Also, this would raise the possibility of having integrated arts school as a choice magnet in the future. There is one other position being added, but that is through grants funding, and that would be a minority recruiter in the talent office. And we are doing that at the urging of the state of Connecticut through the Alliance Grant. That's one of the purposes of the Alliance Grant that we have not taken advantage of. It's going to require us to spend money on one less CSID in that grant, because that's where they're all funded, but this is an appropriate thing for us to do. But again, that would not be in the local budget.
Just really quickly, what's the price tag on that one position?
77,000.
For the visual and performing arts, yes, approximately with benefits.
Did you say 77 or 177?
177.
That's long overdue, by the way.
That's with benefits, right?
Yes. Okay, just finishing up now, I think the last slide before the appendix is the detail on health insurance. And of note here, the top line increase in the health insurance rates. The actual rates are not yet published by the state. They won't be until April 1st. But our health insurance consultant has, who happens to also be the health insurance consultant for the state 2.0 health plan. So I think she has hopefully pretty good information. We have a top line projected increase of 7.6% in the rates, but we are seeing some offsetting savings, particularly in some savings on retiree medical. We've moved a significant portion of the health benefits expense off to grants as part of a initiative to essentially align the grants budget, that if we are funding the salaries in the grants budget and that position has benefits, then we would expect the benefits to be budgeted as well in the grants budget. So because of those offsetting items, it results in the increase that you see here of well, $800,000 in the benefits budget in the finance department, or 3.4%, and the overall increase, including benefits that is budgeted in departmental budgets, of $983,000, about 4.2%. So the net budget impact overall on benefits for next year is a 4.2% increase. So I think that pretty well concludes the formal presentation. We do have
Now, were you going
items
to
in
comment on security?
Yes, we do have we've already, this, I'll just go through these quickly. This is just a chart of the grants budget projected at $23.5 million. Couple items. Well, we've talked extensively about the excess cost of Medicaid already. We did anticipate an increase in the Alliance District funding of about $900,000, and that is in accordance with the state's adopted phase-in plan for the ECS grant. The state adopted last year a 10-year phase-in. They've altered the ECS formula, and they essentially rejiggered the formula and said they're going to phase in the implementation of that over a 10-year period. Next year would be the second year of that phase-in, and if that phase-in continues to happen, it results in $900,000 of additional revenue coming through the Alliance District grant. So we have built that into the budget. Other than that, all the other grants we've assumed are flat. We've already talked about the records. Yes.
Can I just insert, we need to be prepared. We went to the legislative breakfast this morning, and there was a lot of signaling to be prepared for cuts from the state level. So Brian's been saying this for a long time, and so,
Sorry.
That's okay. No, it's hard to be Cassandra, but we need to be prepared for what we do if that happens. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. We talked about that slide. This slide is just a detail on our excess cost reimbursement. It shows some history, some revenue trends, as well as the projection for next year on where we expect the excess cost reimbursement to be. And then the last slide deals with the outsourced security guards. Kristen, you want to
Yeah,
take this
you see
one?
on the top piece, it represents the 18-19, what was budgeted for, outsourced guards at the elementary school, and you're probably wondering why there's nothing for middle school. We paid for that out of carryover initially, but in the 19-20 budget, we have 12 elementary school security guards outsourced and 8 middle school outsourced. In the budget, we have built in the $588,000, which is associated with a 6.5-hour day. There's also an option for a 7-hour day, so that incremental half an hour per school day, if opted in, principals can pick that up or fund that through their SBB.
And I do want to add that this is an example of an item that was why I sort of hesitated in terms of when you were asking about, what's a current services budget, because in this case, security guards, it was a decision made last year to fund the security guards from carryover money for this year. But if you're looking at it from budget to budget, it looks like an increase in the budget, and it is a current service. No one's proposing to reduce those security guards at at the elementary schools, but budget to budget, it is an increase of how much was that? That's
$235,000.
So that's a $235,000 item that is part of our current services budget.
And that delta is the fact that you use carryover funds from previous budget
Exactly.
surplus
Last year.
to fund that.
Right.
So some things aren't so straightforward. To your point, it may require a deeper conversation
Right.
to walk through that.
Okay, I think that concludes our formal presentation.
So we're almost right on time, and so the next 45 minutes are reserved for board questions and discussion.
45 minutes. So, Tom, thanks, Tom. So if we could for Thursday, right, let's have a walk from goal 9. That's your 9.5 million. If we could have a walk of that reconciled with the object codes, split, and have sped split out, I think it would clarify a lot of the, just the in-between, what we're looking at here.
Yeah, if you go to the first slide or second slide after the title slide, we do have the breakout by departments here. So what we will come back with is we can come back with by object code, by department. So, and we'll highlight the items over some certain dollar threshold to say, okay, anything over $25,000, put an explanation or whatever, or something like that beside it. Does that sound like that would work?
Yeah, I think.
I think what we're gonna get asked, by the city, if we're in discussions with them, is kind of like, what are the increase in our contractual obligations? Which is what I said, which I initially came up with as being, 4 point whatever. And you're saying it's 9.5. And I understand the security thing, okay, that's only $235,000. But, basically, if you look at, contractual health insurance and the bus contract, transportation contract, it's about 5.2. And so we can add the 230,000 from the security, that I guess is the same service, so that's 5.4. There's like $4 million of an increase that, how those are same services. I understand what some of these are, in terms of magnet school, growth enrollment, but that's not necessarily a same services budget. You could argue it could be, but I'm just saying from their point of view, I'm just wearing a different hat. We just need to kind of look at that, I think, and we can do that Thursday.
I think there's an inherent tension here between, a view of the world that, in which being stagnant and the same as you were is acceptable, and one in which, we're trying to live in, which is growth and improvement. And, so we can break all these things down. I think know, we've gone through this internally, that process. It's very hard to take a position against anything that is recommended here. I think you'll see that breakdown.
So then my last question just was, with respect to the individual departmental requests and what you, Dr. Adamowski reconciled, what that 3 million and change, were those specific SOP items, or like what were those? Are we putting them off to the future?
Again, we can provide a breakdown. Some of them relate to the implementation of decisions you've already made. I'll just give you one small example. For example, when you approved the gifted program redesign last year, you made a commitment to the coursework for the teachers that had to be retrained. That's an expense. A number of these expenses are in the talent office. So some of those are implementation of things where you've already made a decision or a policy. Others relate to things like, the implementation of the next generation science standards, and things that are necessary relative to improving student achievement. So, but again, we can provide a breakdown. You may find some are more compelling than others, but we view them all to be important. Javier spoke to you about the need to go to a different system for background checks, which essentially would be a contract. That's one of them. There's all kinds of little things like that, and we've gone over them with a fine-tooth comb, and I'd be happy to share that with you.
Some of the items that were cut out were salary positions that were requested by departments, which, the funding, we decided where to hire them from, we didn't grant them in the recommended budget. So that's some of the things that were cut out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of circles back to not having a clear picture of a 3-year projection between what's here, what needs to be deferred. It is something, this is something that the board can use as a tool to in the negotiation process of getting our budget reconciled, it would be helpful. So I know we had that going in, last month, early December, a 3-year forecast.
Yeah,
can those items kind of be piggybacked on there and detailed and kind of show us where we're going to land?
I've updated the 3-year forecast, and I've got a detailed itemization of what's in the strategic operating plan, or the strategic operating plan items that are included in that 3-year plan. There are other items that departments may have requested in the current year budget that were not specifically identified in the strategic operating plan, but relate in one way or another to the strategic objectives of the board, and were pitched as related to the strategic objectives. But we do have an updated 3-year operating plan that does include all of the items that the board has already specifically said we're going to include in the existing strategic operating plan. So we can distribute that to you before the
net of what you've done here so far would be good, like the additions, whatever you've moved out. Like Dr. Adamowski said, the gifted and talented PD, for example, stuff like that.
Right.
That didn't make this. Where is that going to come in? 2021, 22, etc.
So you just need a list that shows what the 3.9 is that we cut out from requested to recommended, as well as a 3-year plan that details what SOPs are in there. We have that.
And I mean, yeah, if it was classified by SOP versus this would be nice to have,
right,
that would be good too.
Okay.
I agree with Brian. I think last year, one of the problems we had was we did not have a 3-year projection. And as I indicated, we were asking the city to fly blind. We really didn't have a clear idea, except discussions with us about what was coming down next year and the following So I agree. On Thursday, whatever you have, for the second and third year, or second, third, and fourth year, I think we would like to see that. It will give us a better idea, of how to proceed with the city. The city will have a better idea how to proceed with us.
Would it be helpful to you to receive that now?
Yeah, of course it would be helpful.
We had thought, again, in terms of overload and how much, anyone can absorb in one night, we thought that, this would be probably more appropriate for the, Finance Committee, but given the interest in it, we can give it to you tonight, you can also study it, and, the Finance Committee can look at it further.
I think it's extremely important to show the stakeholders of the city that, we have a clear goal of bending the cost curve down. One of the highlights I heard here tonight, and
one of each.
I don't think it should go unnoticed, but, an $800,000 annual savings on sped is a $40 million perpetuity in savings for the city. So what we did 3 years ago in sped and forecasted out is now gonna save $40 million for this city. So anything like that, where we can just forecast that cost curve going down, is gonna be helpful in bringing all the stakeholders into the vision.
I think the Tony, follow up on that.
There it is.
This was, we have this big ask for this year. We have a big ask for this year, and that's why the 3-year projection is so important, is to show that this really is the peak, and it's gonna be declining as we go forward. Right.
See, again, this is information that's very important. If you look at just again, total operating expenses for each of the years going forward, back page, without getting into any details, you can see the downward trajectory, which is extremely important. 22 to 23 is projected at 2.8%, which is something folks have to understand what we're doing. Because most of what we've done is to catch up. We're beginning to reap the savings already, especially in special ed, and there'll be a downward trajectory going forward.
But that assumes that you may have a new strategic operating plan at that point, but that assumes there's no, very large expenditure in it. But this does assume the completion of the current strategic operating plan.
Sarah?
To all of these points, and I think we had spoken about at some point how in a budget of so many millions of dollars, people sort of seize on these tiny things because they can't process how much money it is. It would be helpful to have this downward trajectory as a little graph with columns that people could just go, oh, I see, it will go down.
Something more high level.
Right, because this is, again, a lot of numbers on the page, and even if you're comfortable with it, it's still a no.
There's actually, I've seen something similar to that the city produced in looking at the sort of the bubble of capital expenses for the school system. And how, you can have a bubble as we get through these big construction projects, but then you can see, the debt burden of the city steadily dropping after that. I think we can show the same thing here. It'd be good to have that graphic.
Maybe we could do it by object code, by year, or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, but
Right.
just by
Visual.
So that's an excellent suggestion. And again, I would encourage you to study this further, and the Finance Committee can work with it further, but,
Just hold on.
A comment. I just want to thank both of you for really working on this. I mean, it really, I'm thinking years past, when I first came on the board until now, and Mike and Brian, both Mikes can attest to that, but it's come a long way. I mean, it just before it was line item and you would just check it off quickly, but this is really comprehensive and detailed enough that you can really look at it and understand it, so very much appreciated.
If I may, in the final budget book, I think it'd be well worth early on, something similar to what the city did with the capital budget, okay? Then what we have an explanation, text, catch-up budgets, however, use appropriate language, catch-up budgets, this, that, and the other thing, generate savings, projection over time, is that, with a graph. As long as it's going this way, That's the only thing.
And you know
really
something,
matters.
you might want to lead in with it, with the results of the special ed program, because this is what we told the city we needed. We needed sort of a surge in funding and the demonstrate, the $800,000. That's what we told them we would deliver, and we've delivered it. So that may be part of the pitch is that, we have a track record now. We told you if you gave us a surge in funding for special ed, we would use it in a way that would not only improve special ed, but cut our long-term cost structure. And we did. And we're asking them to, trust us the same way, but they don't have to trust us just, throwing a dart in the dartboard. We have a proven record that we told them that's what we would do, and we did it. We intend to do it again.
And I would include a caveat with that of, in general, the performance overall of the school system right now and how much we've improved, and especially with the new accountability ratings and all of those other pieces, those need to be, set the stage right at the beginning to remind folks exactly of what Mr. Lyon said, of what's been done, what's been achieved, and why we need to continue along the trajectory, and we especially finish out some of the pieces that we already started.
We actually get a return on investment.
Right.
Them investing in us, and, I think Yvette is going to speak at the board meeting more, and we can tie some numbers into this as well.
So, on the 15th, I'm gonna ask you to take formal action to sunset fund, because our MOU with the city speaks to that. Yvette, prior to that, will give you a detailed report on how the financials work in terms of the offset and what has been accomplished. But you're right, it's almost a textbook example of how this could and should be done in terms of changing the trajectory of expenses. And this is with serving 100 students more at the same time.
And there's intangibles as well, the quality of services have also gone up, but I think she's gonna talk about that as well.
It had to, or it wouldn't have
Right.
worked.
Other questions?
I'm wondering if we could consider moving two expenses to capital from operational. First is the instruments for the band program, and the second is the furniture for the Montessori. It's like $300,000, but that offsets some other holes and might lower the operating ask. And I am wondering if you have a projection of the full cost K-5 of Tracy character? And a full projection of all 6 classrooms of the Montessori.
I think I had put actually on the,
Was there a
3-year
number?
financial plan, if you look at the sheet
Mhm.
like this, you'll see, a couple of those items. The, Tracy Character Ed School in grades 4 and 5 is estimated $134,000. The Montessori with 2 additional classrooms in 2020-21 is, 628,000, and I think I've got a 3rd year Montessori we're doing.
So the,
Oh, we did, no, okay, so that's the 3rd year of Montessori there.
when the full Montessori school is built out, you're suggesting that it will cost us 300 plus 50, like where do we land, like $500,000 a year for the 6 classrooms, or where are we landing?
It's, the first year is,
Well, the first year will be the most expensive. Once the training costs are accomplished, we'll have a drop off. We would have to project that out.
I think that would be helpful.
So maybe we could do a one-pager on that, so you could see the whole picture.
Any choice-
I'm reluctant to do that until we have the feasibility study, because
Right.
we need to know exactly where the school would be, but also the feasibility study is going to recommend how you grow the classes, and there is a definite Montessori point of view on how this is done. We might need to wait on that until March when we have the study in place, but certainly we can do it at that point.
We need to know what our long-term
Yeah.
commitment ballpark is before we commit to the first year.
There's also a couple of variables in here, in terms of, which of these, of these items might be eligible for grant funding or donor funding. Again, we have a lot of interest in this project, and so we may have some of this offset in various ways. If the Alliance Building Grant is instituted again, we would have a surefire way of modifying the rooms and the FF&E as well.
Speaking of other funding, and I'm thinking of private foundation funding, not state or federal funds, but at one point when we had talked about the marine science pathway, it had been discussed that there was interest for private foundations.
There is,
that
and
still
we will be receiving private funding on that. There's a lot involved in this that is that will not appear in your budget.
Okay, so this 50 here is in addition to.
This is just the program cost,
Okay.
which you provide for any special magnet district type program. There's a lot to this in terms of equipment, technology, a boat down the road, a research vessel, the partnership with the Marine Academy in Montauk, and we anticipate that a lot of that is going to be covered by private funds. So this is just basic base cost.
Got it. So what's helpful there is to know that, and I'm thinking about when we look at the overall cost of the school system altogether, if I'm an external stakeholder, it's also helpful to know that there are other folks in the community have skin in the game too, and that, yes, we're doing this, but Norwalk isn't doing this alone, that we have additional resources that are also.
I just want to ask Ralph, is there anything more you can say about that?
Well, I mean, I can use this as a specific example. This year, we received from an investor in this area that I know will want to invest in this moving forward, $51,000 for us to be able to train our teachers and to be able to develop the program. Once the program's developed, they are also interested. I know that they're very interested more in helping with program costs, this specific one, more than maybe capital of like fixing the building itself. So that's why you see some upgrades in capital. But they will, like I said, they'll come across, and there's others too that will do that in time. But that's just one example of a number of them that are starting to.
We have the issue of the pilot's licenses, because this is a certificate program where each every student gets a pilot's license, at the end of it, and those fees and all that. So again, a lot of this is we're anticipating is going to be borne by private costs that cannot be accomplished for the $1,000.
Right. No, that's, I didn't seem like it did. I think that to get a real appreciation of everything that's going into the school system, otherwise we're looking at the proposed city budget and it's almost a false narrative of what's actually going on in the school system.
Just a question to Barbara. Just so I know what I'm expecting for Thursday, you asked Tom to capitalize instruments. Where are these instruments?
In the band goal, 150K, and then the furniture is on page 8 in the Montessori
I'm
below.
sorry.
That's okay.
So, okay, so it's
That's okay.
250 is operating and 150 is
Conceptually,
instruments.
it could be capitalized.
We're gonna buy the instruments?
We did
And they'll
already
last.
last.
Yeah.
Band instruments last a lot longer than strings.
Okay, thanks.
Otherwise, that's fine.
Yeah, I got that one. Yeah, I got that.
Remember, that means we lose control over it. We have,
Oh.
it's going to be, land use and building management is going to be voted on. Musical instruments.
So we can end up with the staff, but not the instruments. That could be like
Well,
music management.
I mean, Gap only has a 5-year depreciation schedule on those, so it's not like a building.
It's not bad.
Brian, can I ask you a quick question?
Or a Latin textbook you could use for 50 years.
I don't wanna, did you already ask for more detail in 500? In it, because it's showing a 30.8% increase.
It is
That's-
because it's 440.
Oh,
The
Because
next-
it holds
but
all
that's
of
the
the
excess,
academic,
that's the excess cost.
Yeah, 4.4 million of that is the excess
and we're
buffer.
gonna, okay, and we're gonna see all that in this guide breakdown and all that. So we're gonna understand it.
Yes,
So-
we're gonna give you a breakdown on that.
Great, and I was just looking up last
That's
year's
pretty
Fund
standard.
12. So apparently last year's Fund 12 was 17,994, and this year's 23. So I think that's the 4 million that we were missing.
Right,
Is that
that's
right?
on the door,
Okay.
now credits on the chart.
But what I also noticed is that the total gross with all the grants and everything, it went up, actually, it's going up 18 million, but we're only asking 12.8. Where's the other 5.2 or whatever?
Part of the grants comparison, I think in the 18-19 book, it maybe didn't include pieces that are now included in
Got it.
brought to light in
Mm-hmm.
1920.
Okay,
I think it's
so
true.
could we get some kind of explanation of exactly what shifted
Right,
there so
we-
that we can say, it's not apples to oranges, it's apples to
I
apples?
mean, it's really $1 million increase in that area, and
Mhm.
it's related to the Alliance District grant,
Okay,
which is 900, and it's by the formula, so who knows?
yeah.
So, you know, in terms of your breakfast and legislative concerns, we are getting this increase based upon the formula
Mhm.
that was approved in the bipartisan biennial budget a year ago.
Mhm.
We now have new legislators who are talking about changing the formula. So if the formula were to change again, this is anyone's guess as to what would occur. Our position now is for stability and predictability, and to maintain the formula, which was debated for days and months and hours, to, you know, let it play out, and for us, it's somewhat favorable. It's not, of course, what anyone hoped for in terms of equity, but basically what it does is it takes money, it doesn't increase overall state funding, but it takes money away from 85 districts incrementally and redistributes it to poorer districts, like ourselves and like other cities, and that's the source of the Alliance increase. So our hope is that the legislature will not be able to agree on a totally new formula, and the current formula, which is new, this is the formula that gave more weight to student need as opposed to property wealth, and also included for the first time ELL students. And so this was fairly favorable for us, and again, represented an extensive bipartisan compromise. Our hope is that that will stay in place.
Julie?
So, one
I'm
question.
sorry, Sarah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
She
You
was
go first.
before,
Yeah, yeah,
actually.
please go ahead.
No, after you. This may be a misplaced comment, and we don't have to have a ton of discussion about it, but I always think when I see tangibles like band instruments and Montessori furniture, if we're looking at companies to provide in-kind donations rather than spending money. So that's just my thought, I'm dropping on you.
One piece that I didn't see on here, and maybe I'm missing anything related to the School of Distinction discussion that we had just had.
It was.
Where?
Yeah, I
And if
think
you
I
look
put
under-
year-round school, but I don't think we put it, yeah, I didn't put a dollar around it, because, I just don't have any idea what we might be looking at there, and my understanding is that we were hoping again to use outside funding, foundation funding to support that effort, but whether or not there will be some district expense there, I really don't know. Maybe the
Okay.
superintendent might.
Well, we're not recommending in this budget any district expense.
Okay.
So, you know, we have a general framework and parameter here that is loose and evolving and moving because we've got some 16 foundations involved in this discussion. But the thought is that this is a 5-year project that would be phased over 3 years, and that it would be largely privately financed, or at least the incremental costs. So for example, the costs between the regular school year and the year-round schedule, you know, which is over $1 million, would be funded by the donors. Now, at some point, 2 or 3 years out, if this is successful, if it's successful, again, nobody has done this, nobody has actually demonstrated that it's possible to bring all students to standards, to bring high-need students to standards in a high-poverty situation. Let's assume we're successful. We have the possibility of changing our state finance system as well as our practice. And at that point, it may be that the board would be called upon to pick up or at least transition over a period of time some of these expenses. I don't see that on the horizon for the next 3 years.
So it's not on here at all for 1920, and then there's a placeholder potentially for 2021.
Potentially, but not likely.
Okay.
I just want to add a quick comment. You brought up a really, just not as valuable, some of the information we've been sharing, but it's equally also, in my opinion, important about the band instruments. Years ago, it brought memories back to me. We used a company called Rental Instrument. Dr. Adamescu, before your time, and we had an agreement with a lot of kids in band in our high school. And they did repairs, but they also wanted to work, and I remember meeting the owner several years ago. He really wanted to have a partnership with Norwalk Public Schools. It didn't pan out at the time, but I think that's something we should investigate, because it's an amazing company, and they really want to give back, and they want to help the community, so I think we can have some savings there if we reach out. It's called Rental Instrument, so located on Main Avenue in Norwalk, Route 7, right by the connector. His name is Ken, I don't recall his last name,
but I had 2 conversations with him in the fall and connected him with
yes,
Alicia.
it's right on the corner, but they
Yeah.
want to give back and they want to help. And unfortunately, at that time, a lot of students, and I know for my own kids who are in band for many years, we used them to rent instruments, but they did want to give back to Norwalk schools and help out. So I think that it's worth the call if we can work on that.
I do want to add, I had 2 conversations with him this fall,
Mhm.
and the original $10,000
Yes.
commitment was for labor, which doesn't cost them more.
Right.
So going to them for actual instruments, which is tangible cost, they might be able to help us with some sort of deal, discount, something, but I'm not sure that he.
We don't know unless we reach out,
So,
right? So I'm sure
um,
we can, that's a conversation.
Yeah,
that
so we can
administrators-
look into that, we
Yeah.
can explore that again. I think that Brenda, this would fall under your purview in terms of the music lessons, but, I do recall that Craig Cruller researched this, a year ago, and they did look at renting and leasing versus buying.
Yes.
They determined that, buying, was of less cost, and there were also some reasons that our music educators had as to why that was more advantageous, but again, we have to revisit that discussion.
I have a proposal for a way that the board could approach this in future years. And that is, I'm wondering if we couldn't have the committees vet department budgets at a more granular level in December, January. I know you start the process in December or something. And then it kind of endorse their focus to the full board, such that, for instance, curriculum would go through curriculum committee, SPED would go through SPED committee, finance and would go through finance and facilities. You've got it broken down, but it seems like then we would have some expertise on the board in each area, and we could sort of answer each other's questions without taking up too much of your time, and, just a thought
Great.
for the future.
Good, that was a good plan for the future. Brian?
I just wanted to echo on Heidi's comments earlier, and thank you both, and thank Nina, and thank all the staff for putting this all together.
One more last comment. I also want to piggyback on Mike Lyons' comment as far as the successes that we've had, especially in special ed over the years. So I think really highlighting that will go a long way with the city, especially the community, obviously, but that's a huge achievement for us over the years, especially now.
Okay, I think that is all our questions. We'll be discussing this further at the Finance Committee on Thursday at 6, and then the full board will be meeting again next Tuesday.
We know the time, Mike? Is it same time, 7 o'clock?
The board
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah.
Regular
15,
meeting
okay.
time. Regular
Okay,
meeting time.
got it.
It will be in
Thank you.
common council chambers, I believe. We'll be back on a normal schedule this Tuesday. We're off.
You also want to keep the capital.
Yes.
Yes, so the capital budget is going to the finance committee.
No, it went to the
I'm sorry, it went to the
facilities
facilities
committee.
committee.
Yeah, the facilities
Last
last
week.
week.
The facilities committee will be recommending that to you on the 15th, sometime after that.
Exactly. Okay, we will move to public comments, if there are any. I think I saw Mary Jordan had signed up.
Crossed it out.
You crossed it out, okay. Any other public speakers? I guess there are none. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Lyons and seconded by Mr. Corbett. All in favor? Unanimous and 8:27.
Wow.
Call it a night.
I have a question. I'm so proud.
We'll give you a gold star, Barbara.
Thank you.
You're gonna love it, Mike.
Steph.
$1 million.